All right, so today we're going to do some biology review. This is going to review the things that we've learned in Science 9 that are going to carry forward into the biology unit inside of Science 10. Let's get going. So again, like I said, we're going to go through biology stuff for Science 10 practice. Just like last class, I want you to fill in your cheat sheet as you watch this, pausing if needed. So in other words, as we go through this, if there's anything you're like, oh yeah, I got to put that on my cheat sheet, pause the video right there, put it down on your cheat sheet, and then you're good to go. Now, remember, it's also ideal for you to put things in your own words, but at very least, you can copy the notes down directly if you wish. If you'd rather just do that, if you're more comfortable using the words I put in here, go for it. Now, a bit of a heads up, on Thursday, June 18th, we will have a formative quiz, of course, just like everything else, not for marks, but it's going to assess our understanding of these essential concepts that are going to lead into Science 10. I'll have it open on Wednesday, June 18th, or June 17th, so a day before that. But it's really important that you get that done so I can get a good snapshot as to what you understand for going into Science 10. Now, again, it's not going to be used to grade you. It's not going to be used as a means of determining whether or not you can even go into Science 10. Of course, you can go into Science 10, but I just want to have that kind of an opportunity to say, okay, where are our strengths, where are our weaknesses, and where do we go from there? Anyway, I'll stop rambling. Let's get going. So again, just a reminder, I've shown you guys this before, of just where we're at. Today, again, we're going to be focusing on biology as a part of Science 10. And the stuff that we've learned in Science 9 that are going to lead into that is some stuff from environmental chemistry, as well, of course, the stuff from our biological diversity unit. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, biology doesn't have as many things from Science 9 that carry forward into it as chemistry did. Chemistry is really reliant on the things that we learned in Science 9. Biology, not as much. So it's not going to be nearly as heavy of material, but still important to know. All right, so the concepts that we're going to need are the concepts of diffusion and osmosis, which we'll go over today. We'll also need to understand just some basics behind the different types of reproduction. That includes sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. And remember, asexual reproduction is broken down into 4 different types. You just need to know the basics behind it. More important than that, though, you need to know mitosis and meiosis, as well as the structure of DNA. So again, not as much content as you need for chemistry, but still very important nonetheless. Let's get going. All right, so diffusion and osmosis. Let's start with diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So diffusion is just basically the natural tendency for things to go from places where there's a lot of them to places where there's not a lot of them. So this picture right here, putting some droplets of food coloring into an Erlenmeyer flask of water, actually shows how diffusion really works. So initially, it's very high concentration. There's the food coloring in the droplets. Then as soon as it hits the water, it kind of wants to spread out and go all over the place. And if you were to leave this for a long time, you'd find that the little food coloring particles spread out throughout pretty much the entire thing of water. Now, osmosis is a similar process, but osmosis is the diffusion of water. So it's where water moves from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Now, the reason osmosis is so important is it's very useful for cells dealing with getting water in and outside of them. So individual cells, both plant and animal cells, will absorb or release water depending on what their needs are, right? So water inside cells will pass through something we call a semi-permeable membrane, which is a barrier that lets water through, but not most of the other material, right? So depending on what it wants, it can use osmosis as a means of moving water from an area of a high concentration to an area of low concentration. So if it had too much water in it, osmosis would release that water, right? Now, if you're going to work against osmosis, you need to use something called active transport, which is actually something that takes energy. So you'll learn about that more when you get into Science 10. Next up, sexual reproduction, of course. This is the process that animals, plants, and some bacteria use to produce offspring. Basically, all you need to know from a science perspective on this is that it involves 2 gametes, one of which is male, one of which is female, and they join together to form something called a zygote. So a gamete and a zygote, those are some important terms that you need to understand. Now, eventually, a zygote will develop into offspring, so that's what actually grows and develops and then becomes a newborn offspring. And that process of joining 2 gametes together is called fertilization. And another thing you should just know is a gamete only contains half the chromosomes. We'll talk about chromosomes a little bit later today as well. A gamete only contains half the chromosomes of the parent organism, right? So if the male gamete has half of their chromosomes and the female gamete has half of their chromosomes. When they combine together, you're going to get the full number of chromosomes. Okay, that's basically the idea. All right, moving on now to asexual reproduction. One thing you just need to understand is asexual reproduction does not use gametes. No gametes involved here, right? The new organism is created in a different way from only one parent. There's 4 main types. There's binary fission. That's what's going on in this right now. It's a very slow process for some things. Basically, that's where their cellular material is duplicated, and then they split in half to form 2 completely identical offspring, right? Budding is another thing that can happen. Budding happens on most types of coral, but also on some types of cactus. It's basically where new organisms grow off from the central one, and then they can break off and form their own little colony of things, right? Another one is spore production. Spore production is it's often confused for being like a plant, but it isn't. It's a type of fungus. Fungus or fungi, rather, are neither plants nor animals. But a good example of spore production is, of course, the mold that forms on bread, right? The reason it spreads is because these mold particles, which are a type of fungus, release spores, which are too small for us to even see, and then they land on a different area, and then, of course, they can feed off the nutrients on that area. The area, of course, is called a substrate. Maybe I'll write that on there. Substrate is something that something lives on to get nutrients from. Spores rely on that, right? But again, this is asexual reproduction, and those individual spore colonies are identical to each other, at least genetically. Vegetative reproduction is another one. I know one thing that this happens for is strawberry plants. Strawberry plants have like these shoot systems that form off of them, so they grow above ground. And then when they strike another place in the soil, it forms a new shoot from that growth, right? So when it's a genetically identical copy, so it just reproduced itself, okay? Next thing up, it's gonna let me change slides. Yeah, here we go. Just a little bit of a story. You don't have to write any of this down. You don't have to worry about this, but I saw a story just in early June, so a couple weeks ago now, from Red Deer. It was actually about the Red Deer River, that they've actually identified Prussian carp showing up in the Red Deer River. Now, the reason this is important is that Prussian carp are an invasive species that come from Asia, and we're not really sure how these Prussian carp got in the river. Perhaps someone had one as a pet, or perhaps they were using it as like live bait or something like that, and they released it, but now they're found in the Red Deer River. And this is a problem because it can cause a lot of damage to a local ecosystem by eating plants, like little weeds that grow in the rivers and stuff, and other fish, which outcompete the fish that are native to southern Alberta, right? So these carp, they kind of just propagate themselves all over the place, and then they eat a bunch of the food, and then of course the other fish that are already there, they're now outcompeted, and a lot of them will die off, right? Now, why this is significant in terms of our biology conversation is it's actually been noted that they can clone themselves. Female carp can transfer 100%, not 50%, but 100% of their DNA to their eggs, making them viable without a male carp present. So in other words, it is possible for even animals, or at least certain type of animals, like carp, of course, to reproduce asexually as well, right? Kind of interesting. And again, that's not a very well understood process, and it's rare in nature. It doesn't happen with most things. But anyway, so mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis is a form of cell division used for growth and repair of cells. That's all you need to know on that one. You don't need to know the exact process where they, duplicate their chromosomes, and then of course they split, and then it's, all that. You don't need to know that. You just need to know that mitosis is used for growth and repair of cells. And the way I always remember this was like, ow, my toe, sis, right? And your toe just got hurt. You got to repair your toe. So mitosis is for growth and repair of cells. Now, meiosis is the form of cell division that creates the gametes, right? So male and female gametes are produced by a process of meiosis, where it's a lot more steps involved to it. You don't have to know all those steps, but basically it just results in 4 daughter cells being produced. Each daughter cell has half the chromosomes of the original parent, okay? So meiosis produces the gametes. Mitosis is used for growth and repair of cells. Structure of DNA, this is also really important for us to understand. I know I really drilled this in, but it's been a while since we learned it, so you've probably forgotten, and that's okay. But DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, is the inherited material responsible for variation in all living things. Your DNA is unique to you. Now, in the nucleus of a cell, so you see like inside the nucleus of a cell, there are bundles of DNA that we call chromosomes. So a chromosome is just a big, giant bundle of wrapped up DNA. Now humans, in their whole body, of course, have 46 unique chromosomes, right? So these 46 unique chromosomes make up basically who you are as a human, right? Now, those chromosomes, of course, made up of DNA, that's your actual code, but they pair up with other chromosomes, so it's often said that humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Anyway, now segments of DNA are called genes. So if we're to break this down, you have your nucleus. Inside the nucleus, there's chromosomes. Chromosomes are made up of big strands of DNA, and just a single little segment of the DNA is called a gene. Now, different genes do different things. So maybe this gene is for your eye color, and this gene is for your hair color, and this gene is for how tall you're going to be, and so on. But just a gene is just a segment of an overall big strand of DNA. Another thing I want to say about DNA is the way it's coded is there's 4 different chemicals that make up a DNA code. You don't need to know what they are, but it is just important to understand that your DNA is formed by the links between 4 different kinds of chemicals, and that exact order that it occurs in makes up your unique DNA. That is your unique code, right? Anyway, moving on. Oh, we're done. Wow, that went quick. That went really quick. We're only just like 11 minutes or so. Wow. So your task now is the same as the task from before. If you haven't already done it, fill in your cheat sheet, right? So today you can fill in your biology stuff, right? From last class, you should have all this chemistry stuff filled out, but make sure you fill in your notes for biology as well if you haven't already done it. Anyway, if you have any questions, please let me know.